What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today's conversation is with Marcus Aurelius Higgs. Marcus specializes in helping parents be able to communicate with their preteen kids better so that they can live more effective lives and their kids can grow up to be more effective people. Because as we all know, preteens can be very disgruntled and challenging. I don't have kids, preteens especially, but I don't have kids myself. But I do definitely know what it is like to work with preteens. I also know what it's like to be one because I was one at some point. So I know how challenging it can be to raise and communicate with those preteens. So we talk a lot about the best ways to communicate with them on a regular basis, how to overcome a couple of challenging conversations, if you will, if they're being defiant or if they're being self-sabotaging in their or in their talk, how you can talk to them better so that they don't spiral out of control. A lot of what we talk about comes down to being proactive, which is one of the most challenging things I believe. Again, not being a parent myself, but I believe being a parent, one of the most challenging things is being proactive in your communication with your children so that when those confrontational moments do come up, you can, they then respect you more. And that's one of the flowing topics or ideas throughout this conversation with Marcus. But nonetheless, before we get to that, make sure that you hit that pause real quick. You can go give us a quick review up to 5 stars on any of the platforms, Spotify, Apple, and so on. Or if you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button real quick. The more subscribers we have, the more we reach. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do that. So, um, get your pen and paper out. If you aren't a parent, by the way, this still pertains to you because it also comes down to communicating with people or communicating with your spouse. Almost everything that we talk about in this conversation can be translated to communicating with adults, all other adults as well. So if you're not a parent, this still pertains to you. Now get your pen and paper out. Enjoy this conversation with Marcus Aurelius Higgs. Marcus, my friend, great to have you on. And I would like to start with the most pressing question, and that
All
is
right.
your name. Is that your given name?
Hey,
Is that your given
th-
name?
that is my given name. I could not imagine going around calling myself Marcus Aurelius. My father, right here, gave me that name, and it it is one of the three greatest gifts he's ever given me. Um, it has shaped a lot of my life. Yeah,
Did he give you some sort of background? I mean, clearly we know where it comes from, unless there's another
sure.
Marcus Aurelius that I don't know about. But did he give you background on it at all?
It was when he was driving to the hospital. He was listening to some self-development tapes. I believe Jim Rohn. There's a there's one where he was talking about Marcus Aurelius and responsibility, and he heard a quote, and he's like, "Hey, let me call this kid Marcus Aurelius." And I have meditations usually on my desk. It's in my bag over there. But I'm a I think if you are a Stoic, you never say I am a practicing Stoic. But yes, I do practice Stoicism, and I'm very deep in it. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah, I would show you my phone, but it's also secondarily recording us. But my screensaver on my phone is a Marcus Aurelius quote, and my backdrop for my computer is also a Marcus Aurelius quote. So here we
Hey.
are. Needless to say, I was excited for this conversation, but
Yeah, man.
nonetheless,
Yeah.
no, that's super cool. I envisioned at some point when I have a son, I actually also envisioned naming him Marcus Aurelius. So it's cool to actually meet somebody with the name.
Yeah.
But
Awesome.
so you have a unique and very specific audience that you work with, which I think is very needed, especially today. I guess everybody would say that in any generation. But,
Yeah.
today kids are very disconnected and parents are also disconnected in their own way. They kind of put themselves in their own world and and it makes it harder to be able to help a child through their developmental stages. So that's why I'm so psyched about this conversation because because I think it's a needed conversation in many levels. So, first, how did you get into the space? Well, I'll do an intro like we talked about, but what is it you do, and then
Sure.
how do you get into the space?
Sure, sure. I'm a communication coach for parents of preteens, and I was a high school teacher. Taught grade 12 and grade 9, where we're teaching a lot of identity. A friend had maternity leave, and this is these are the books from the fifth graders.
Oh, cool.
They they wrote a book for me. It's called the Goodbye Book. It's a lot of stick pictures with
Oh, cool.
afros and so.
That's very
And
cool.
yeah, it's awesome. And the reason I uh I want to work with this age is because one, answering the mental health issue that we see going on. It's sustained inquiry. It means asking a question for a long time. And on my board, I used to write, how do I teach grade 9 to write the greatest story ever told? I was an English teacher. And we are the stories we tell ourselves. I am a third culture kid, if you know the term, but it means my mom and my parents are from a different passport country where I was born or where I grew up. So identity plays a big factor in what I do. My mom's from the Philippines, my dad's from the Bahamas. And that's who I taught. I taught kids who had parents, multicultural parents, and so on. Um, and communication intrigues me. I studied communication in university, journalism. So those are two reasons as to why I'm attracted to this. And the third is just, I say, my dad's here. Um, I'm speaking to what my father needed or what I felt when I was a teenager at this time, a preteen. And he was the adult in the room. No blaming, no shaming, no complaining. But you learn the skills and you come back home. And that informs a lot of what I do. So, like, I'm an advocate for teenagers, but I'm helping to create the conversation that the parents might meet their needs. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's easy. I don't have kids, so anybody who's listening to this who does have kids, you can take anything that I say with a total grain of salt. But I do understand development. I do understand behavioral development. I do understand psychological development, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, it's easy for anybody, even people with kids, to point at a parent and go, "Oh, that parent, they need to be doing X, Y, Z better, or they need to be doing this better." And I think, there's too much of that in the world anyway. But at any point in time, for any parent, they're doing the best that they can in that moment. And
Yeah.
and even as an adult, it's easy to look back at your childhood and say, "Oh, it's my parents' fault that this happened. It's my parents' fault that I have this deficiency or this issue, being able to deal with people," whatever you want to blame them for. But parents are always doing the best. They also have their traumas. Their parents had their traumas, and so on and so forth down the line. So you cannot disconnect any of that, and you need to be able to see that.
I'll give you two more points on top of that, Jerry. One, you've worked with kids in a coaching capacity, so you're working with the development of kids. Um, I believe everything that eventually grows must first break. And I call this the identity breaking years because every time there's a transformation in our life, from dependent to independent to young adult to aged, like there's a breaking where our identity is asked, who are you? So, as a person who understands physical development, that's the same way with mental development. I think in all development, what story do you tell yourself after the breaking, right?
That's good.
Um, how do we create the context where you can manage that? Because life is just about stress management. There are three types of stress. It comes from Phil Stett's Lessons on Living. The stress to maintain, right? The stress to meet blindside or things that will throw you off of equilibrium, coming back to Marcus Aurelius, and the stress for expansion. That's progressive overload. So all trauma is for me is unprocessed stress. And that's how we lead to post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
And everybody has been stressed. You choose to process it or not. It may not be you could point fault, but it's your responsibility to deal with. That's how I am. Last thing I'll say. Whenever somebody's not meeting your expectation, it's one of two things. It's either they don't have the skills, they're not supported. The, the third thing is it's not important to them. But if it's important to them, if it's something they want,
Mm-hmm.
they just don't have the skills to do it yet,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't feel they're supported in making that effort. And that's when we work with them. And I'm thinking about the skill of parenting,
Yeah.
or I'm thinking about the skills of snatching
Yeah.
and any movement or something, any skill.
Yeah.
You just don't have you don't have the skill yet, or you don't feel supported.
Very good. I love that view, by the way. And I think that we have some rabbit holes we could definitely go down, but I'm going to grab my brain and pull it in a different direction just for a second, and then we'll come back to the rabbit holes if we have time.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, what does effective communication to you look like for with a teenager or preteen? Because
Yeah.
I think the first place to start is with definitions. You can say, "Hey, it's important to communicate with your kid well," and to you that means one thing, and to this person it means a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So what does effective communication to you look like?
Yeah. Beautiful question. Beautiful question. Um, you have to understand your audience first. So, what is a preteen going through right now? They're in a transition stage of Britney Spears just came to mind with not quite a woman, but not yet a child.
Oh,
But
nice. That's good.
and that window is so I use the word awkward. It's awkward if you make it. But if you look at a group of seventh graders, eighth graders, you have this one little pipsqueak kid, you have this tall adult kid, and they're all there mixed up. And they're trying to figure out, okay, who am I? I still want that I Gabor Mate wrote this book called Hold On to Your Kids. And that's where we hold them close. They're safe, they're secure, they're seen, they're soothed, right? And I call that maternal energy. But then there's paternal energy that pushes them away. And it says, you're still safe, you're seen, you're soothed, and you're supported, but I need you to be independent. And it's still showing them that they're loved because that's where that dynamic tension is created so that they can eventually be interdependent. That's the final stage
Mm,
of development. I take care of me to be in support of you. You take care of you to be in support of me, for the community, for the collective. But in that stage of being pushed away, how do you still communicate you're loved and you're supported while I need you to explore your autonomy? Sometimes the kid is hesitant to do it. Sometimes the parent is hesitant to do it. And that's where that tension or conflict is created. Nothing's wrong with conflict. It's how we manage the conflict, right? Good communication is realizing you are the adult in the room. And there's an approach of parenting called autonomy supportive parenting. It's recognizing your autonomy, honoring your wisdom while also supporting you in that. That's the first thing. The second thing is bringing their awareness to their, I say, virtues and values. And this is again my approach because a lot of kids, when they're going through that breaking, they're thinking, what's wrong with me? Letting them understand nothing's wrong with you. This is the developmental stage. Here is what's going to happen. I'm going to give you some insight into what's going to happen so we can manage this better. And also, you're going to be able to meet it with your character traits or your character strengths. And we can go deeper into that. But effective communication is letting them see progress, encouraging them along the way, and helping them grow and develop. Yeah.
Um, and I love the autonomy part of that. What
Yeah.
I believe, and you're kind of affirming, is that the sooner you can teach a child to be independent, the more likely they are to be successful down the road. Success means a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. So you can define it however you want to
Sure.
define it. But the sooner that you can teach a child to be autonomous, to think for themselves, to make decisions for themselves, to problem solve, to do all of these things that are necessary once you get to be an adult, to take responsibility for their life, to take responsibility for their actions, maybe not their life yet. Maybe you don't have to go that far, but nonetheless, to start taking responsibility and becoming a small adult essentially, the sooner you can do that, the sooner you can the more likely they are once they get to that range to actually be able to achieve something. And I think that that'll really show up in their mid 20s whether or not they've been let go soon enough. You know what I'm saying? I was not let go soon enough. My dad was always wanted to grab me and help me. He
Yeah.
loved me a lot. He wanted to make I was his only son, I was a middle child. So he wanted to protect me as best he could. And he did that.
Yeah.
But, I had trouble in my not tons of trouble, but in my mid 20s,
Yeah.
sometimes taking responsibility was not the easiest for for me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I love that autonomy part.
The idea, there's this book by Madeline Levine called The Price of Privilege.
Mhm.
And we're finding that with a lot of in the developed world, the kids who don't know that
Things are different
uh,
somewhere else.
well, I mean, what we call with progressive overload, the reason we
Mhm.
pick up heavy things and do hard things is because you know the effort that it
Mhm.
takes. But when you don't know that effort, when the blind side hits you, you don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah,
That's one thing. The second thing is when you don't know who you are from the middle, and a lot of my work, I said, deals with identity. And we're noticing that kids who grew up on social media, this comes from a book called The Anxious Generation from
the anxious
1995.
generation.
Correct.
Yeah,
The Anxious Generation. From 1995, the kids who grew up on social media, they're forming their identities, for lack of a better term, they're forming their identities behind the screen, in the likes, in the challenges. Remember, when you're entering into adolescence, you're trying to look for other worldviews. So you're actually searching for how do other people see the world so I can form my identity. If you're doing that on a screen, when that screen closes, the question is, who are you? And the thing about that is, if you don't know who you are, how are you going to push back against the world that is trying to conform you? How are you going? And when I say push back, that's called coping. That's another way we say cope. How are you going to deal with the stresses of life if you don't know who you are? And that is leading to a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the stress. But um, yeah, that's a unique thing about this generation.
it really is, and it's funny that you say that. So I would say, so I post across 5 or 6 platforms, and the most unique one is TikTok, as far as
Okay.
comments go. So
Okay.
the comments that I get on TikTok, which
Tell me
the
about that.
age range is, what is it, 20 to 28, I don't maybe 20 to 30. It is the range of kids that have grown up on social media primarily. No, I mean, when I say that, like, I'm 39 and I've had social media since, for 15 years or so, but I know social life before it. But
Yeah.
this group doesn't know life before social media. Excuse me. So their comments are very, it's almost like they find an attack on them in the post, no matter what I say.
Yeah.
So the other
Yeah.
day, this was kind of funny. I put a post out about challenging reality. You think that reality is one way because you spent your whole life looking through this window, but really there are 7 billion other windows to look through. There's 7 billion people on Earth. So there's tons of other windows that you can look through. So your window is just one window.
Yeah.
And there were about 4 or 5 that took that as me saying that their politics they thought wrong about their politics.
Yeah.
So what you're saying makes perfect sense that their identity is caught up in something and they can only express it online. And once they're offline, they probably don't. If I were to have the same conversation with them in face to face, they would just look at me and nod their head and just wouldn't say anything. So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
very interesting, that connection.
Another thing that Arthur C. Brooks touches upon, we have, okay, I'm not against technology. We're talking right now. You're in Ohio, I'm in the Bahamas. Um, but because a lot of our interactions are with the screen, we don't get that oxytocin release.
Mhm.
And oxytocin specifically it's the the affection endorphin where you need eye to eye contact and you need skin to skin touch. And that's why being in person creates this feeling of how do I manage this? So it's interesting. Now, how do we intentionally, again, education by definition means to bring forth. And as an educator, we say we create the context for this thing to flourish. I believe there's beauty in there. How do we intentionally create the context for kids to step into their greatness?
Mm,
That's what I want to do. I do it with communication. Yeah.
that's good. So why, now that we know your definition of communication, effective communication, why why is it important for their development? What can it lead to? What can ineffective communication lead to?
Yeah. I'll tell you in a phrase, and then we could get into the science, the details of it. But the voice with which you use to speak to children becomes the voice with which they speak to themselves.
Mm,
Yeah.
I just got the chills.
Because right when I told you that, you remember
Hmm.
voices that said stuff to you when you were a kid.
Hmm.
And we have a negative bias as humans. So once I did bad, heard it forever. Twice I did good, heard it never. Like we remember where we boffed up, and we remember the emotional attachment of when we boffed up. Um, there is what we call the Lazada number, where so many positive inputs or empowering inputs for one negative, but it's you just want to be intentional on creating a mind. I usually don't use word positive and negative. I use empowering and disempowering just because we have a goal or desire we're moving towards, what gets you there or what takes you away from it. That's all there is in life. Because one thing you might call negative is actually helping me towards that. But again, that's all nuance.
100%. Yeah, I'll use effective or ineffective. So same idea.
Yeah.
Mm,
Um, but how do we create in the mind of the kid? Again, I love reading, you can tell, but Lanny Basham has a book called The Mind of Champions, or The Champion's Mind, I believe.
champion's mindset, something to that effect. I've read it.
Maybe, yeah.
Mm,
How do we get in the mind of the kid the pattern or the ritual of what went well, a growth mindset, if you will? Okay, what is the next challenge that I can expand into? Um, I think it's by establishing it at a young age. I think I'm off the question. I can't remember it, but
no, it's all good. Why? What can
oh
ineffective communication lead to?
yeah, let's look at Commodus and Marcus Aurelius if you want to. We weren't there, but we could only assume based on what Augustus wrote. There's a story of Commodus. So Commodus was Marcus's son. When he was about 8 years old or so, I might get the date wrong. He was a twin, and his twin's brother died. But the water was lukewarm, and he wanted it warmed up. Because it wasn't warm enough, he asked for the servant to be killed. And to appease him, they threw a goat skin on the fire so that he could smell it. Now, this sounds to me like the making of a narcissist. He got everything that he wanted. Marcus was on his campaigns. He didn't necessarily. I don't think he was there to be a present father for Commodus growing up. He touched bases here and there, but he didn't necessarily pass on his values. Let's look at Marcus. When he was 12 years old, he would take on the stoic practice of putting on sackcloths and sleeping on the floor, of dealing with hardships. His mother came, picked him up, and put him in bed. Those are different ways in which the kid is communicated to of what you can expect out of life, of what you're getting from it, of value creation, and so on. Ineffective communication can create the lens by which we see the world. And again, we can't necessarily put our lens on somebody else, but I think as adults, I want to give you something whereas you can manage and navigate this life. I'm going to give you a piece of wisdom, and it's going to help you along the way. That's what I think our job is as adults inside the kid's life, because we're not meant to parent singularly. Like we parent in pods or with coaches, with teachers, with other trustworthy adults inside society.
That's good. I would say excuse me. Um, Potentially a lot of reason parents have trouble with this idea is, well, maybe they don't. You can tell me, but I would assume that a lot of parents have trouble with that idea because they don't understand it in themselves. They don't understand that also for themselves, the same holds true that whatever you tell yourself, that the external world will then support. Your outer world will be a reflection of your inner world. So, to some extent, they also have to embody and understand that this is true for themselves also if they're going to understand that it's true for their child.
Yeah. And you know what? That's stuff that everybody's working out at different parts of their journey. Sometimes children are the way in which we learn about, oh, I see what I was saying to myself. And whenever you rub up against a heavy weight, you realize what you're made of. Sometimes those kids are a heavy weight. That is what tests parents, and we learn about ourselves as we deal with kids. Yeah.
So, let me give you a couple of scenarios or maybe uh, acts, if you will, and I'm curious how you would go about maneuvering based on this act. So,
Mm.
defiance, a
Yeah.
defiant child, someone who I was definitely defiant. I was stubborn and hard headed, to be sure.
Yeah.
But someone who won't do as you say. Most what I hear most parents say is, "It's because I told you to do it." That's what I hear,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But that I think we all know it's not effective, but in the moment we just want it to get done. This is what I told you to do. Why don't you just do it?
Yeah.
So what's effective communication look like in that instance?
Sure. In the show up framework that I have, it starts with a strong identity. And again, that's a particular framework. It, it, so I would
You
first
can go
start.
through it. You can go through
Okay.
the framework if you want. I was gonna get to it eventually, but
Sure. In starting with a strong identity, I would want you to know always to have your dignity whenever I'm speaking with you as a kid, growing up and developing. Um, and in having your dignity, I'm speaking to your virtues and values. Virtues are the 24 characteristic traits that are with everybody, but there are five that are expressed uniquely in you. And when I engage and interact with you, I'm going to speak to your virtues. Oftentimes, with a defiant person, it's perseverance, leadership. Um, I'm going to acknowledge that that is in you. Sometimes it is too much. Sometimes it is too little. When I use the word too, for what? For the well-being or for the harmony of this, of what we want moving towards our goals. And then values. Values just means what's important to you. Autonomy might be very much important to you, or self-mastery. That's following self-determination theory, right? So I do want you to become, and this is where autonomy supportive parenting comes in. Like I want to start giving you trust so that you can start trusting yourself, but then also understand collaboration. So in that, um, if I start noticing a problem, the H is hold space for collaborative thinking and critical thinking, collaborative problem solving and critical thinking. Um, I'm going to start noticing a problem, and hey, son, you're not the problem. But I notice that you're frustrated, and all emotions are welcomed. Your emotions are telling you, giving you signals about the outer world. All behaviors are not welcomed. And the thing is, if we're yelling, hey, let's cool down. If we're throwing stuff, there have to be some guidelines so that we can keep, like, not the peace. This is going to be contentious, but I'm respecting you and keeping your dignity, right? And then I'm going to have you have some buy-in on what the solution is, because clearly we're having a problem here. What is your point of view? And I'm welcoming you into the problem solving process. As the adult, I'm going to set the tone. So yeah, my word is the last word, but you feel as though you've had some say inside it. It goes through three steps. I invite you into I actively listen, and that goes 3, 6, 3, 1, 3. 3 minutes of listening, and then that 1 minute I'm going to tell you what I heard or say, hey, this is my thoughts on it. And then 3 minutes back, I'm going to listen to you. Um, and then we come up with a solution that we're going to try for some time, and then we'll revisit it to see if it works or not. But you have some buy-in, and actually we'll come up with some consequences that you also choose. All right. SHO is opening up communication. So if I only talk to you whenever something goes bad, that's going to set the tone for our relationship of I only talk to you when there's problems. So then how do we actually stack the deck in our favor of and it doesn't have to be long moments, but it could be like we call it greasing the groove.
Greasing the groove.
Just
Hmm.
just small bits, setting that up as a ritual. So those are the first three parts of the show up framework. But when I'm dealing with a defiant kid, you have to understand all behavior comes from meeting a need. There was something you weren't having met. There was a need you weren't having met. There was a need you weren't having met in your defiance. And I would have to explore that with the parent. But there's a reason for it. There's an understanding for it. And we need to bring you into the conversation to understand that.
So, um, I love the reflection part of it, understanding what they're trying to say. That way, you're not just jumping down a rabbit hole and immediately making a bunch of assumptions. Um, that's part of I forget what it was. Whenever I had the coaching business, the fitness studio, we would read books every month, and one of the books we read was motivational interviewing, I think was the
Yep.
name of the book. And
Yep.
that's what I think that's their framework, something to that effect. Listen, reflect, and listen back, or something to that effect.
You're asking them what do they want? Because that's a creator question. And then you're asking them on a scale of 1 to 10, why didn't you choose a lower number? Then they'll start making a case or an argument for why they want it more. And then you lean into that because it has to be intrinsic motivation. That's
Hmm.
the first thing. But second thing, if you assume something and then you put that onto the person, that's the easiest way to have a person shut down. It's like, I wasn't even thinking that. And now you think that I'm thinking that, it means you don't know me. So yeah, you could have this conversation. I'm out of it.
That's good. I also like the one part takes being proactive, opening response or open communication, I think is what you said. Um,
I had
that requires being proactive. That's something that you have to build into your life, because otherwise you can't, like you said, you have to set yourself up for success down the road. And that's something that people have a hard time with, again, with themselves being in the fitness industry. People want something that works now. I want it to work today as quickly as possible. And that's where those outbursts come. If a kid's defiant, just do what I say. That's the outburst. I want it to work now, but it's not going to work now. You have to set yourself up for success. And I love that opening communication, building in those communication points where you're asking them how they're doing, where you're asking them questions about their life and their school, and maybe it doesn't have to be this big in depth, because a early teen's not going to give you a big dissertation about their life anyway, most likely, but at least you're opening the potential for that to happen.
Well, I'll say like this: at all stages of development, it all happens the same way. There's just age appropriate approaches. So you're right. You're not going to have the same conversation you're going to have with a 15, 16-year-old that you're going to have with a 13-year-old. However, the same concept, I feel, mm, you know when a person's talking down to you, or you know when they're holding you in dignity. You also know when a person wants to understand you, yeah,
Hmm.
and give you some autonomy. Just to back up a little bit, I want to be clear. Like, I'm speaking of this framework in a very idealistic way. There will be breakage. And I think that's a that's a part of design. That's not a flaw. That's a feature. Um, when you try to lift the weights and you don't lift it up, That's a part of your progress. What you do when there ruptures, you repair and reconnect. And what that is to say, again, it starts with identity. That is saying, this is not the person I want to be. I made it right. And this is what I plan on doing going forward. Trust is built over time. And what we're doing is we're trying to establish trust at a preteen stage to build it over that time for the teenage years. And in building that trust, it's that's what's going to keep you as a parent inside their life. Even when they're out of your orbit, they know that there's that safe space to come to. And it's when you make those repairs and reconnections. That's when it actually means I care about this relationship. Because if I didn't care, I wouldn't say that. And this is what adults do when we fall on our face.
No doubt. I love that. There will be breakage.
Yeah.
That goes through and through in all parts of life. So let's look at another example, and maybe we can carry a few things forward. Self-sabotaging talk. And by that I mean, maybe not self-sabotage is the word I'm looking for, but they're basically talking down about themselves. They did something
Yeah.
wrong. They had a baseball game and they, missed a swing, or they missed the fly ball and they dropped it and they lost the game, and they're telling themselves that they're a bad person and that they're terrible and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
How do you go after that conversation?
Yeah. I'll say where it could start and then how we could remediate it. Remember, when a kid's transitioning into this adult world, they feel the big expectations of them. And they really don't know the rules of the game of, hey, you're gonna miss that that swing a lot of times. The pro is a person who has more misses than you have at home runs. Um, so I understand why this is heavy for them. Also, as they're entering the teenage years of adolescence, the sensations of the emotional highs are going to be high, the lows are going to be low. And it's supposed to be like that. They are more sensitive because it's telling them navigating this world. So I get if you're going to be in an emotional state. Yeah, emotions are okay. Let's deal with the behavior and how we're speaking to each other. Um, I can control two things come to mind. I can control what I can control as the parent. I am going to meet them with Lanny Basham's with winning in mind and the champion's mind. That's what it was. I am going to start off. I am going to get them in the routine of, hey, what went well? All right, what needs work? What can we do for next time? So we're focusing on the next time of it. I am going to show them their progress along the way, because if their awareness isn't brought to their progress, their awareness is where it is. It is on their flubs, their messes up, they're messing up. I respect you see that. There's also stuff that I see. I'm going to bring their awareness. I'm going to find evidence and examples of things of where they're awesome. And I'm going to hold that truth until you're ready to take it on. Now, I say I'm going to do that. We also parent in pods. So maybe I might speak to the adults in their life. I might even have them speak into their lives, because even if you run a business, you're not going to be the CMO, chief marketing officer. Like, you have other people do communication for you if that's not your strong suit. You might have that coach speak into your kid's life, or that teacher, or your auntie or your uncle, right? Um, there are other exercises we do with letter writing. Um, Very quickly, again, you're writing down evidence and examples that you see, things that you can prove, because you don't want to give empty praises to people. That might just feel like fluff.
Mhm.
But you actually say, look, this is what I see. Like, and I can hold my beliefs as true of that you're awesome, and I will prove it to you time and time again. I'm not going to argue with you, because you can't force somebody to believe something. But I will give a damn good argument as to why I believe you're awesome, right? But in the letter writing exercise, at the bottom of it, we say, and when you're ready, bring this letter back to me anytime, and I'll give you X number amount of time that I'll listen, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and I will listen with no interruption and give you all the time you need, or give you all the attention you need. This comes from the book How to Talk So Teenagers Will Listen and How to Listen So Teenagers Will Talk.
Hmm.
And the whole idea is if it's a letter, it's an IOU that they can keep, that they know they have support when they're ready. And you're somewhat depositing into their bank, and it's accruing to know when I'm ready to go to mom or dad, I know I can take this. Sorry, that's talking about support, but not self-defeating talk. Um,
Well, it sounds
I
like
think
while you're thinking,
I
it sounds like there's a lot of proactiveness still in there. A lot of it goes back to being proactive. What went well? What needs work? How can you get it's building in that ability to reflect, that ability to recognize when things didn't go well, and to recognize that it's okay when things don't go well, but you are not the thing. You're not the action. We can figure out how we can make it better next time by just taking a second to reflect and understand how we can get better next time.
that, and that's what a lot of mindset coaching is. Stepping into the mind with the learner to make sense of their thoughts as you're going through. I hear you say proactive. Yeah. Yeah. For intentional growth, you have to be proactive, because think about it. If we weren't, there are people in big rooms who are paid big amount of dollars to take their attention to tell them another narrative. There is a story that's going to be told to them. Are we going to influence it or not? Because we are the stories we tell ourselves.
No doubt about that. That we are. So we started the show up framework. I don't think we got through the whole thing. I think we got to O.
Oh,
So let's roll through the rest of it because I love the framework and I think that it's so effective. So start from the top again, just briefly,
sure.
and then let's roll through the rest of it.
So we start with a strong identity. And in starting with a strong identity, everything else in the show up framework is speaking to that identity. That is to make communication relevant. Nobody listens to anything unless it's relevant to them. We open up, sorry, we hold space for collaboration and critical thinking. Problems are going to arise. This is life. We deal with problems. Let the kid understand they are not the problem, but we're here for support. And then we collaboratively problem solve with them, figuring out life with them. O is opening up communication. There are other tactics, but it's ways in getting your kid to open up. And then when they do, understanding how to meet them so they don't shut down. They will shut down, but sometimes they're just processing stuff and how to read those moments. Yeah. W is wonder and explore this world together. To wonder and explore this world, it's basically project-based living or project-based learning. It means committing to something that's effortful, that's self-directed for a long period of time that you can't give up on. This comes from Angela Duckworth's book, Grit. Her and her family would commit to something to say, okay, it's in education, we call it sustained inquiry, but asking a question, being curious for a long time to try to answer a question, getting people to buy in. And it's a project you're working on. For you, it might be this podcast, it might be a business. For your kid, it might be language learning or a particular sport or skill they're learning, right? And it gives you another common ground to speak on, to talk about what growth is. And then UP is unveil your potential, which just means celebrate. You celebrate their growth along the way. BJ Fogg, we tiny habits. He says we don't celebrate enough, man. There it is the grind, but then finding joy in the grind. Yeah, and that's the whole framework. Learning how to do that again and again.
Over and over. Yeah, and basically built into that is being proactive. Like that's what I hear going back to all of this is being proactive, and a lot of the problems is just being reactive. It's trying to
Yeah,
react to situations. It's trying to react to outbursts and things like that.
yeah. I just wanted to add that in the work that I do, and I'm not toying with this, but I need to get more beta clients just to work it out. But I work directly with the parent, one to one. I'm working on me one because this is a show up framework for me, but I believe this is what human development is. And then I work with them in transformational coaching. And these same principles are the principles with which you use your kid with your kid. These are the same principles I used in the classroom to bring forth the greatness in kids. But I work with the parent one to one. I don't work with the kid. Just want to make that clear.
Hmm. Um, yeah, the what I also remember in Grit, and well, about that specifically, I think she told a
Mm-hmm.
story of her daughter maybe wanted to quit soccer in the
Ballet.
middle of the
Yeah.
season. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I think that was the section that you're talking about, and she said, "You know the rule. I mean, once you start something, you gotta finish it. You're gonna take it to the end. At the end, you don't have to start again if you don't wanna go out for soccer next year, that's fine. You don't have to start again. But you're going to push through this because there's gonna be plenty of times in life that you get to the middle of something and you're gonna wanna give up on it, and you're gonna wanna stop.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to push through. Eventually, you can make another choice, but once you get to the end of the road, whatever that looks like, the end of the soccer season, the end of the project, the end of whatever that looks like, then you
Yeah.
can reevaluate, reflect, and potentially make a different choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So very strong.
Go through what you committed to. Yeah.
Yeah, very strong. Marcus, I appreciate you so much, brother. Lots of wisdom in that brain for sure. Lots of wisdom today. I think that there are some good takeaways, but a lot of it just revolves around being proactive. It sounds simple, not easy for sure, but it's definitely, I believe, I would imagine, worth the effort. Again, I don't have kids. I do plan on having them, and I do believe that that I will go that route as best possible. But again, all the parents would look at me and say, "It's easy for you to say, Jerry." Um, Nonetheless,
I'll say like this, Jerry. I'll say it's simple as with all things. You want to be rich, earn more, don't spend as much. You want to lose weight, eat less calories, more exercise. But it's effortful. And the only reason I don't say easy or difficult is because one, it comes down to your attitude. Um, and then it gets easier over time as you get more reps in. Um, Parents aren't as it was reported aren't as reportedly happy as single people. However, they live more meaningful lives, and that is the one thing about parenting that hopefully you will experience. But when you're living in service to something and it's thriving because of you, it it's a new feeling. It is a new feeling that it's a beautiful feeling, and that's what we're here for. I believe on earth, not to necessarily be parents, but to serve others in such a great sense of, oh no, I'm good. I'm doing this for your well-being. And then to see them also serve back into your life, it's a beautiful thing.
hmm. Well, I look forward to that feeling, and I second that sentiment about serving others also. But thanks so much, brother. Definitely appreciate your time. Where can people find you in case they want to know more?
Sure. MarcusHiggs.com. I have some workshops there that I'll put up. Um, I'm in the process of doing that. If not there, on LinkedIn. I'm not so much on other social media networks, but MarcusHiggs.com or LinkedIn. You'll find it Marcus M. Aurelius Higgs. Yeah.
Very good. I'll make sure to put all that in the description, man. Appreciate you so much,
Thank you,
Marcus.
brother.
Thanks for your time, brother.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.